We are awakening together. This is our weekly gathering we hold online. For more information, visit our website, awakening-together.org. We'd love to see you there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to be back in the sanctuary with all of you after a bit of a year hiatus. Today, we're going to be talking about aging, loss, and enlightenment. Reflections from the messy middle, that's where I am, on how aging and chronic pain have served as spiritual teachers on this path to enlightenment. But first, I would love for all of us to greet each other in fellowship this morning in the chat. It's good to see so many faces online this morning. Okay. So good to see everyone. So I'd like to move on to our statement of purpose. We are an assembly of equals joined in common purpose, awakening to one true self, with an appearance of many faiths, many cultures, and many symbols. We seek to discern one truth and to rest in its embrace. In today's homily, we'll focus on two core values and reflect on those. The first is the third. We accept one true self, which is one presence or being, non-dual, without beginning or end, and absolutely changeless. We live this value by practicing letting go of the belief in the individual selves of who we are. We accept all forms as temporary appearances, permitted through enduring awareness of self. We live this value by honoring all appearances and all experiences while continually reflecting on changeless truth. So now let's move into some announcements. And thank you so much for those announcements. Okay, so I think that leads us into our first song of the morning. So this is a song you're all going to be familiar with. It's Landslide by Fleetwood Mac. Chose this song, one, because Stevie is reflecting in the Aspen, the Colorado mountains, right, on her life and wondering, like, it just didn't feel like it was going the way it was supposed to be going. And she felt like it was a landslide all kind of coming down on her. And she was 27, right? And, thought her life was falling apart, not realizing this amazing, abundant career was ahead of her. And so I just love you to just reflect on the lyrics and the music as you listen to this first song. Yeah. Let us reflect in some prayer. Please join me. Lord, help me to surrender any clinging or attachments that I have that keep me from flowing in life the way that I deserve to. May I celebrate the experience of life as it is without binding or clinging to expectation or previous experience. Let me release the false notion that life was ever intended to be permanent. To not allow myself to build my life around attachments, but to celebrate them in the times that they were there. To let it flow like a river of purpose, a river that's designed to flow until it's reunited with the lake, with the ocean, with the vastness that is the divine right order of existence. God, heal my perception to age consciously, to age on purpose. to age with intention. Allow my life to be humbled to purity and innocence. To allow my thoughts to slow down, everything to slow down, to align with my highest self, to shift from a body identification to a spiritual one. Let my life not be an end, but a continuation of all that I am and all that I am connected to. Let me embrace that connection and that my purpose continues to go on. Thank you. Just want to recognize that I know a member of our community has recently passed unexpectedly, which I didn't know about until this morning, being here with all of you. And today, we are embarking on a sensitive topic of what it means to age, what it means to experience life, and our purpose within it. And it's certainly something that I've been going through as I've been experiencing grief. So I appreciate you for being here and for being brave and tackling that topic with all of us this morning. I'd like now to introduce our reader, Audrey Whitehead, to share our readings. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you, Reverend Erica. Our first reading is from The Heart of the Buddha's Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh, Chapter 18, The Three Dharma Seals. Nirvana is the extinction of all notions. Birth is a notion. Death is a notion. Being is a notion. Non-being is a notion. In our daily lives, we have to deal with these relative realities. But if we touch life more deeply, reality will reveal itself in a different way. We think that being born means from nothing, we become something. From no one, we become someone. From non-being, we become being. We think that to die means we suddenly go from something to nothing, from someone to no one, from being to non-being. But the Buddha said, there is no birth and no death, no being and no non-being. And he offered us impermanence, non-self, interbeing, and emptiness to discover the true reality, the true nature of reality. In the Heart Sutra, we repeat over and over that there is no birth and no death. But reciting is not enough. The Heart Sutra is an instrument to investigate the true nature of ourselves and the world. When you look at this sheet of paper, you think it belongs to the realm of being. There was a time that it came into existence, a moment in the factory it became a sheet of paper. But before the sheet of paper was born, was it nothing? Can nothing become something? Before it was recognizable as a sheet of paper, it must have been something else. A tree, a branch, sunshine, clouds, the earth. In its former life, the sheet of paper was all these things. If you ask the sheet of paper, tell me about your adventures, all your adventures, she will tell you, talk to a flower, a tree, or a cloud and listen to their stories. The paper's story is much like our own. We too have many wonderful things to tell. Before we were born, we were also already in our mother, our father, and our ancestors. The koan, what was your face before your parents were born, is an invitation to look deeply, to identify ourselves in time and space. We usually think we did not exist before the time of our parents, that we only began to exist at the moment of our birth. But we were already here in many forms. The day of our birth was only a day of continuation. Instead of singing happy birthday every year, we should sing happy continuation day to you. And our second reading is from the Tao Te Ching, verse 16. Empty your mind of all thoughts. Let your heart be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings, but contemplate their return. Each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted as a grandmother, dignified as a king. Immersed in the wonder of the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings you. And when death comes, you are ready. And this translation is by Stephen Mitchell from 1995. Thank you, everyone, and back to you, Reverend Erica.
Oh, Audrey, thank you. What a beautiful, beautiful reading, Audrey. You just brought that reading to life for everyone, and I appreciate it so much. After a year of not preaching in the sanctuary, initially I thought, let's ease my way back in with a light topic of loss and aging. But now understanding, right, that I always marvel at the universe, its ability to put us exactly where we need to be, regardless of whether we feel ready or we want to. But that's what's up for us, right? And certainly with Glenn's passing, it is up for all of us, not just me now. So last Saturday, I turned 42. So some have told me that I'm too young to be contemplating my mortality at 42. Meanwhile, if you ask my 12-year-old brother, he thinks I'm a fossil, right? I'm ancient because I had a telephone with a cord at some point, right? So young and old is relative. And, honestly, at this point, I feel somewhere in between the two. Truthfully, I was excited about turning 40. I was prepared for it to be the peak of my life. So I've heard, right? And the universe sometimes has other plans for our life growth than we anticipate. And these life circumstances that I'd love to share with you have led me to more deeply contemplate the meaning of my life and how the suffering of grief, not just grief and loss, but the suffering of grief and loss and physical pain in my circumstance has led me to reflect on what it means to age, what it means to pass on, and how we can take that experience of suffering and transform it into joy and compassion, because suffering is our messenger. It is what is communicating to us all the time, right? And it isn't meant to stay as suffering. It is meant to be transformed, right? And I've used the teaching of the three Dharma seals, right? Impermanence, non-self, and nirvana, as well as the Tao, to hopefully help us get there today. And I'm preaching to you in full transparency, right? From the perspective of the messy middle, right? Like, I don't have it all figured out. And I don't know that we ever fully do, right? That's the path to enlightenment, but it's the practice of, right? It's the practice of these things that allow us to arrive. And then we keep going. We don't arrive and stay there, right? We arrive and keep going. That's what life is. And there was a quote that stuck with me, and I was trying to figure out where I got it from, and actually I wrote it in my journal from a million years ago. That, you know, dying is the privilege of living. Now, at the time, I thought of life as a beginning and death as an ending. But I still think that quote is relevant, and we'll get to it. So let's rewind a little bit. In the story of Erica, as Anne would say, right? The story of Anne. In the story of Erica, right? The greater part of my mid to late 30s, I was a full-time live-in caretaker for my grandparents. Now, my grandparents, just to set the stage, they are parents to me. My mom's a very young mom, and they were essentially my caretakers. And so at 39, I lived in their home. I took care of them. They did the day-to-day sort of grunt work of caring for people who were preparing for those last stages of life. And at 39, I was heartbroken to place my grandmother, who had been struggling or living with Alzheimer's and dementia, into a facility, right? And my goal had always been for her to pass at home, right? And I had to put her in a facility because she just needed more specialized care. There's a part of me that is still dealing with the regrets of that. My grandfather was passing from liver failure due to diabetes, which he did not have. And I remember just, you know, in the last few days of his life being like, sure, let's have ice cream. Let's eat together. You know, that was it. That's all he would eat, you know. And I was proud to say that he passed away at home. He passed surrounded by his dogs that he loved and his family and all of us. And I feel like I achieved something great. So we sold the childhood home. We settled the estate. I moved. Good things happened in my sadness. I met my partner, who I love and is wonderful. And although I was deeply sad, I still felt 40 was going to be this new chapter, that I could move forward, restart the career I had put on hold for caretaking. I had had a new coaching business. I was newly ordained as a minister, and I'd had all these beautiful spiritual lessons and to take with me, and I was ready to serve others. I never saw age as a limitation. And then my grandmother, she passed in 2022. So this was like my mom dying. And I think I watched both my parents now pass and take their last breaths and be in the room and see death up close. And I felt sadness. To which extent, that's the extent I knew about grief, was sadness, right? I didn't really know all the other facets and faces of grief that there are, right? There are so many. And for those of you who have lost parents, or I should say, had parents pass on from how we know them, it's a different kind of grief. It just is. I've lost boyfriends, right? I've had boyfriends pass on. I have had children in a youth group die of overdose. I have had friends pass away from illness, and this was different. This was different. I couldn't put my finger on it. And here's what I've come up with regarding parents or caretakers, whoever that was for you in your life. And regardless of your relationship to them, they're your first bond to the world, your first emotional bond in the world. And in many ways, they are this unseen anchor in your life. And when they are gone, or perceived as gone, you just don't feel safe in the world anymore. Like you're just not in control. That emotional bond that was formed is now torn. And I have existed my whole life with them in it. So how do you imagine someone who has always been there is suddenly gone? It's like imagining a world without a sky. You feel rootless. The ground has been pulled from underneath you. It is unsettling. It is uncertain. And I couldn't identify it at the time, but my sadness was mixed with fear. And if you can imagine, like a young child who loses their parent in a crowded shopping mall, and I feel like most parents have done this with their kids at some point, that kid who's panicking. Now, fast forward. Fast forward is a similar feeling, right, when your parents are gone, of emptiness and abandonment, like that child in the shopping mall, right? And if you had the privilege of being a caretaker for your parents, right, you have this added extra layer of grief, of loss of purpose, right? Because, I felt very privileged to be their caretaker. It remains my greatest achievement. There is a deep loss of purpose when you feel that role has been taken away. So, I handled this like any, healthy, stable adult handles this. I bought tons of cereal and junk food, and I sat in my pajamas and I watched 80s cartoons and tons of 80s movies. I brought back Rainbow Bright and My Little Pony and He-Man and everything. And I played old games, and my partner was like a great sport with all of that. And I just wanted to go back and curl up on my grandmother's bed and fall asleep, just listening to the sounds of the house, busy house, knowing that they were there. So here's the part I didn't know about grief, right? I think that there's clearly a disconnect between the intellectual awareness of someone dying, parent dying, and then the emotional reality of what that means. And I could feel my motivation waning. I cut the caseload that I had for my coaching clients. I quit my consulting jobs. I asked to take a break from ministry responsibilities. Life was slowing down, right? The things I attached to achievement were now sort of put aside. And the one thing that I had maintained was this attachment to physical fitness. I was physically strong. I was in the best shape of my life. And I use this as a major coping mechanism. It's like the one thing I felt was a constant while everything else was changing. And it's good to have an anchor, right? It was the number one thing I used to cope. If those of you who don't know, I have always been a very physically active person. Paddleboarding, in foreign countries and doing extraordinary races and rock climbing, cycling 500 miles across the country and up the East Coast. Like these are how people know me, right? This sort of great energy and doing all these like wackadoo things. So I leaned into this and I decided I would go climb a volcano in Ecuador, or a couple of them, right, at 20,000 feet. Now, this could be a whole lesson in itself, what I gained from that experience, but we're not going to go there today. It's a mile marker, right? So I did this. I went to Ecuador and I climbed these glacier peaks, best experience of my life. And when I said, when I get back, I'm just going to get one full-time job. I'm going to focus on rebuilding my life and we're going to move forward here. I did climb the peak. It was great. I climbed 2 of them. And then when I finished, I bent over before we were getting on the bus to pick up my pants and my back just seized. And I thought, well, shit, that sucks. But you know what? I came here, I accomplished what I wanted to. I'll go home, I'll heal my back. No problem, right? I didn't think of it. I blew up my back a couple of times. But what I didn't realize was this was going to be sort of the next thing that I was attached to that would leave me, at least for now, right? And so I've now been in chronic pain for over a year, extreme nerve pain. And this radiating down my legs. Just to give you an idea, if I walk for more than, 10 minutes, my legs go numb. It's just, I'm in pain all the time and it'll drive you nuts. It's not always excruciating pain, but it's pain that's just constant pain. And, taking away my ability to achieve in the weight room or to go out and play in the mountains, coupled with this emotional hole left by the death of my parents, just put me in nosedive depression filled with deep sadness, with anger, with resentment at healthy people, no motivation or spirit or will or energy. Suffering was an understatement, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I began to consider, like, okay, what have I done with my life? I've wasted it. I haven't done anything. I'm not doing anything right now because I wasn't out achieving athletically in my career. I didn't have the purpose of caretaking, and I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I was being forced by my circumstances to just sit and not achieve. And without achievement, what was my value? And I think people go through this in their life as they move through different phases, is what does this mean for me? And at 40, I felt like my life was half over and I didn't have anything to show for it. I saw lines on my face that I saw for the first time, sunspots earned by years of playing beach volleyball competitions and hours on the mountain. And I see my body changing from inactivity and stress eating. And I had lost control of my life. And I was stuck somewhere between not quite dead and not really alive, right? And this was how I saw my world. The Buddha says that suffering is a holy truth, or it leads us to a holy truth. And this series of deep losses has forced me to slow down and see the root of my suffering and attachments, which I hadn't been really fully willing to do, I think, until now, right? And we're going on 2 years almost. That wasn't how long grief was supposed to last. But then, who put a timestamp on grief, right? I thought grief ended at a certain point. I don't think it does, ever. I think it just takes on different shapes. And sometimes grief is a wave that takes you under, like undertow, and rolls you around. And other times, grief is just a wave that you ride over and go, oh, okay, that's no problem. And it's one or the other. right? And but the thing about suffering is that it's transformative, and that's what it's supposed to do. So, I dedicated myself to getting rid of my pain, right? Like that was my thought process. Well, I just get rid of this. I don't like it. I'll get rid of the physical and the emotional part of it, and I'll get back as quickly as possible to the life as I knew it, a very strong and capable person. And through that failing, I've started to see that the clinging to my past, which was hurt more than the physicality of my chronic pain, right? The cause of my suffering was not sustainable. I couldn't keep doing that. I knew something had to change, which was interesting and ironic considering I thought most of my suffering was coming from the idea that things had changed externally, right? That was the problem. And now I wanted the very thing that I thought caused the problem, I now wanted to help my circumstance. So what does suffering communicate to us? So I asked myself this question, and then the teaching of impermanence came up, right, which Audrey so beautifully read to us. I've been aging. I just realized when I thought about impermanence, I was like, oh, God, I've been aging my whole life since I was born. I've been changing, right? Clearly, I'm not 10 years old anymore. I'm not 20, I'm not 30. There's a natural order of growth to things. Things don't stay stagnant. Life is changing all the time. So why now? Why at 40? Why is there this intersectionality of loss and aging? What is that telling me? What is that telling us at any point in our life when we have these thoughts? Lying somewhere between young and old. I think your parents dying seems to make you fast forward in emotional growth, right? Into this next phase of human existence. And what impermanence says is, yeah, that's what's supposed to happen. That is the natural order of life. And we never stay the same, and thank God, because otherwise I'd be 10 years old stuck in my mom's house, or I'd be in my anxiety-filled 20s. But I just want the pleasurable times. I just want the times that I want to be permanent. But truthfully, if we're honest, even the best of times were mixed with challenge and difficulty. We just remember the happy outcome. The resistance to this impermanence was apparent when I got hurt, right? It made me even more vulnerable, and to crave my parents back, right? Just to curl up and to get support from them. It just seemed like old age appeared out of nowhere. Like, where did this come from? I was not ready. And I immediately reject this. Now I have to learn how to live. I have to learn how to be my own unseen anchor. My own unseen anchor of my life. I need to learn to navigate the world and all its uncertainty without parental guidance. Or the guidance of my partner or my friend, or fill in the blank. Now I must rely solely on inner guidance. Inner guidance, my inner wisdom, right, that comes from our source. My clinging to attachment of the past or of expectations, well, this suffering, this will not do. This is the suffering. This is where the suffering comes from. And it keeps me very disconnected from my source. When Audrey read those excerpts from the Tao, each separate being in the universe returns to the common source. Returning to the source is serenity. If you don't realize the source, you stumble in confusion and sorrow. Well, hello, that's where I am. I'm attached to form. I'm attached to the way my body used to look or the way it looks now, or, I'm attached to, my parents being here. I'm attached to a healthy spine. I'm attached to, right? Like, I'm attached to a lot of different things. And so I stumble into confusion and sorrow. When you realize where you come from, you naturally become tolerant, disinterested, amused, kind-hearted like a grandmother, and dignified as a king. Because you are immersed in the Tao, you can deal with whatever life brings to you. And when death comes, you are ready. This is where I'd like to be. This is where we want to be. And not just ready for the death, right? Not just ready for the what we see as the final death that we pass from this life, but all deaths that are happening all the time. Because the death is, right, and what we've learned from the Buddha is just that it's a change, it's a transition. Not just the big ones, milestone birthdays, right? Or going from young to old, or weight changes in my body, or a new freckle, or a passing thought, a thought born in the mind that then hopefully dies the next instant. Well, what if we hang on to it? What if we cling to the thought? We suffer. I think the deeper understanding from permanence says to let go, to not attach to it. It's not supposed to stay the way we see it, in the form we see it. The not self says, right, it's not the form that you see it in. We talk about life being a continuation of the paper, right? Audrey talked about the paper. Well, the paper was once a tree, and the tree depended on the sun, depended on the soil. Even as it becomes a paper, if I were to light it on fire, it would turn to smoke and ash. Is that the end? No, it's a continuation as it becomes this new thing. I think it's really cool, and it was easier for me to see in women, when my mom was in my grandmother's belly, I was in her, right? And then my great-grandmother was in my grandmother and her great-grandma, and you could just see all of us existing within one another. So it's not supposed to stay in the form, but we continue on. The first part of that Tao reading, empty your mind of all thoughts. Release the attachments. And then it says, be at peace. Watch the turmoil of beings. Be mindful of impermanence. Watch it. See it happening. You don't have to do anything about it. And then contemplate their return. That's understanding source. Death is not the final stop. So now that we know this and we have these lessons, how do we practice it? Because it says, the lesson is not enough. It's only an instrument of investigation into the true nature of ourselves. That's the deeper looking and self-discovery, right? It's not enough just to suffer. We have to transform it. So what do I do with this suffering? What do I do with this pain? What do I do with my sadness and my by fear, by resentment. Well, my pain has become my inner Buddha. It says, okay, I'm here. Now be mindful of me. See me. See me so you can release me and be at peace. Even my chronic pain has become my inner Buddha. Right? There's the tale of two arrows where you get hit with the first arrow, that's the physical pain. The second arrow is, oh, well, that's all my meaning I bring to my pain. That's what you need to let go of. But even my physical pain has been an inner Buddha. I sit with it. When I would normally allow myself to spiral, I sit with it. And I find peace there. So think about, as you go off now, as we move forward with the rest of our day, think about where you have your own attachments to things being permanent, where you have forgotten your source and yourself because you're so attached to all of the little selves, the selves of form and form that they take, that you've forgotten where you come from and who you really are. And how can you practice that today in your life? How can you practice allowing your pain to be your little inner Buddha, to remind you of who you are, to remind you of who your loved ones are? I find great peace in knowing, in remembering the non-self and impermanence when I think about my grandparents now. And it also reminds me of who I am. And this becomes my new anchor. So I encourage you to find this anchor with yourself as you grieve Glenn, as you grieve others in your life, as you pass. Even just the little mini deaths of things that just change in your life as they're supposed to. Find your inner anchor through suffering and transform it into joy and compassion for yourself. Thank you. Thank you for hearing this. So thank you, everyone. I think that leads us into our second song. This second song is called Stop This Train by John Mayer. You're probably familiar with John Mayer, but you may not be familiar with this song. It's just basically about not wanting to get me off this train. This is not how I thought this would go. We need to stop and slow things down. You'll hear in the lyrics, just take in those lyrics and think about impermanence. Think about then the conclusion of coming to non-self and coming in and hear this in the lyrics. Also, as you listen, we are accepting donations. All donations are welcome to the sanctuary. If in your heart you feel moved to give an offering of gratitude and love and support through a monetary contribution, you know that this allows the sanctuary to continue to be a place of healing, teaching, and fellowship for all of us. So we appreciate those donations and enjoy this. If that song doesn't sum it all up, guys, it sums it all up. Happy early birthday, Joseph. Don't renegotiate. Don't renegotiate 68. Exactly in the place you should be in. So I've done enough talking, and I'd love to open it up for sharing for all as you share your own reflections on what you heard today. Love to hear from you if anybody has anything.
Hi, if I can share, I'd
Yes,
love
please.
to. My name's Livy, and this is just thank you so much for this. My dad lived with me for 11 years, and he was 93 when he passed last August. And I'm still on that train. And I just really appreciate your share today. And I feel you so much. And I have a niece who has a rare nerve disease and is in chronic pain as well. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your vulnerability with us, your honesty about the emotional pain and the physical pain, and how you're walking through that. You know, it's like Ram Dass said, we're all just walking each other home. And thank you so much for helping me feel not alone. And that, yeah, it just was so affirming in so many ways. And I'm so, my heartfelt condolences to you. And I just can relate so much. And it was just beautiful. Thank you so much. I really needed this today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that beautiful share. And I think that's what this is all about, right? Like we're all living a human experience, and it's so easy to feel siloed in it, and it's with these lessons and from our own shared experiences that we gather so much strength, and there are times that I felt like, I must be doing this wrong because I do not feel like the best version of myself, or I feel like I should be doing this or have more strength when I'm doing this, and it's just not how it goes. You have to accept where you are in a particular moment or a particular day or time in your life. So thank you, Olivia. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Rhoda.
Hi, Erica. It's so good to see your face. When I saw the title and I read the description, I thought, isn't it amazing how the universe is always taking care of us? You just don't know the perfection of it all until you witness it playing just like it is. And as you shared Stephen Mitchell's version of chapter 16, I was drawn back to Regina's translation. And this line has been with me since I've been contemplating Regina's translation of chapter 16. And it says, be devoted to reaching the utmost emptiness, and then sincerely hold to stillness. And when I hear the first verse of Stephen's and the first verse of Regina's together, in this moment, what I feel is to just let the pain and the grief flourish and just be with it. Nothing needs to be different in this moment. Thank you, Erica.
There is no truer realization than what you just said. I mean, we're all trying to think like, oh, I need to get rid of this right now. This doesn't feel good. This grief doesn't feel good. This pain doesn't feel good. I need to get rid of it. It's not what's required. Just a deep looking, a letting be. That's all that's required. So thank you. Tina.
I am also always amazed that this is like, and I keep hearing someone say, well, it's because we're one, I'm like, okay. And I gotta just say thank you. I didn't realize how many attachments I had. I started making a list of all these titles that I've had through my life, all these attachments. I did like 2 pages in like a minute. I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. I don't know what they are, but I'll learn that later. And what they mean really. But I really loved, I was looking at Glenn's thing this morning, and him and Yolanda were really the reasons I stayed here. They were my first little program, and they were so happy all the time. I just loved that. And he was like a little light, and I love the little muscle thing, and I mean I could just see all this stuff in my head, and I'm grateful that I can remember this, and I love that it was here and it said, trust the voice that likes you. She will tell you we are one, and she will tell you how to act like it. And I love that because I related a lot to having a lot of I am bad belief, going on. And whenever he would say that, at first I would cry because I always cried, and then I'm like, yay, and I'd be like, how do I fix this? To be like, just sit there. And I guess I'm just feeling sad but grateful that I was I only need them for for a very small time. But I'm so grateful because I don't even know if I'd be sitting here with you guys without their joy, without his light. And but thank you. I lost both my parents many years ago, and that's also an orphan feeling.
Yeah. I love what you said, that the voice that said, trust the voice that says we are one. I mean, we have so many voices that are, critical, deeply critical and hurtful. We're often more hurtful to ourselves than we'd ever be to anyone else. And, when you are able to connect with that voice, you can trust that that's where your inner wisdom is coming from, Trust the voice that is kind. Beautiful. Anyone else like to share? Our third song today actually, kind of sums things up. I feel like you've probably heard this before. It's 100 Years by Five for Fighting. He just walks through the years of life as they are, without any real judgment about any of those years, but just walks you through what those years are. The missing piece of the song is what we know about the continuation of life. So hold that message in your heart as well as you listen to this song. Last call. I'm just super grateful. I'm just grateful for this community of people that is just so able to and willing to receive, someone's vulnerability, because that isn't always easy. And that, we're all spiritual seekers. So we take this message and we say, how can I go deeper with myself? Where are my attachments? Right. And this is not just about me and my experience. This is about you and your life experience. And I believe that sharing in this way reminds us that we're connected, reminds us where we come from. And so I thank you all for sharing in that with me.
You've been watching our online gathering. It happens weekly on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time. To join us live in the sanctuary, visit our website, awakening-together.org. You'll want to click on Online Sanctuary in the main menu, and then in the drop-down menu, look for How to Enter the Sanctuary. Right there at the top of the page is a clickable link. We'd love to see you in the sanctuary and join with you in fellowship. Thank you again for watching. Also, please know that if you'd like to stay connected via the Awakening Together channel here on YouTube, you can subscribe and hit the bell for more notifications. We hope to see you in the sanctuary.